Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Large Format Photography Podcast. My name is Simon Forster and I'm joined by my co-host Andrew Bartram and our guest Amy Jasek. Hello Andrew.
Hello Simon.
And hello Amy.
Hello.
Right, first of all, I want to just let people know that since our last podcast when we had Steve Lloyd and Jason Lane on the show, their Chromographica dry plate Kickstarter has reached its goal. So well done to them, and I think well done to our listeners, because I'm pretty sure that it was our show that rocketed them over those last 2% or so over that finish line.
When show 12 aired, I think they were just £1,000 short, weren't they?
They were.
So well done, you guys. Amy, were you aware of the dry plate holder Kickstarter? It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
You know, I think that I was. I recall seeing that.
Well, as we record, it's still live, the Kickstarter. I think as this airs, it'll probably be over. But either way, it's reached its goal. So if you want to get yourself, Amy, a dry plate holder, which can also be used as a sheet film holder with an adapter that they're going to make, which I would think would be fairly low priced, then you can get in on it. And the other guest on the show, so it was Jason Lane, and Jason, Amy, is the guy behind Pictoria Graphica. That's it. And he makes, as well as being a full-time lens designer and all-round clever chap, his sort of sideline, and it's almost more of a sideline, it's a business really, is making dry plates, coated dry plates for sale. Wow. And you can buy 10 dry plates that look like plates that were made in the 1890s, maybe, for $40 for 10 glass sheets, which you're a Polaroid shooter, so, you know, that's cheap.
Yes. It's cheap compared to a lot of things.
So is it dry plate? Is that ever appealed to you? Any of those sort of dry plate, wet plate, alternative-y type things?
I've done a little tiny bit of wet plate. I took a workshop, and in taking that workshop, I really liked it, but I kind of determined that for the present moment anyway, I probably will not be doing that, because I feel like it would require me making a mobile darkroom. You know, it's just not something that I want to get into right now, but dry plate would definitely be easier. It's not something that I have investigated yet, though.
No, me neither, really, but it really appealed to me, and so I did back the Kickstarter for one plate holder, and you know, you're getting a look that is similar to stuff from 100 years ago. You know, it's only sensitive at the blue sort of end of the spectrum, so you develop it under a red safe light,
right?
And it's and you're holding when you develop it, you then got this physical object that you can hold in your hand, and he makes them in 4x5, 5x7, 8x10, and he makes them to order. If you ever get yourself an 11x14 large format camera, he can make you those as well.
Oh wow! Well, you never know.
ISO 2, which means that in where you live in Texas, you can probably shoot at 1/500th of a second.
Undoubtedly. Yeah, I will check that out.
No, it's really cool. It's also interesting when you say you tried wet plate as part of a workshop, because the previous show we had Joseph Brunges on the show, and he does exactly that. He does workshops, and he strongly suggests that people should try that kind of stuff before diving straight into it, because it's quite a serious commitment to get into certainly wet plate and collodion, and it's a little bit easier to go with dry plate. You could argue that dry plate is a bit like a gateway drug to collodion, quite possibly, I guess.
I can see how that would definitely be the case. Wet plate, well, when I did it, we were making little tintypes in a Holga.
Oh, I'd so love to do that.
It was really
me
fun.
more.
S Gayle Stevens does these workshops regularly. I mean, she's pretty much a master at this as far as I have seen. And she's a great teacher as well. But it was wonderful. They were like little jewels, but especially with it being so small, it's extra time sensitive because it dries so quickly in the Texas heat as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I love the quality that tintypes have. That wet plate, it's almost like the image is alive inside of it. So, I mean, you never know. Down the road, I've tried it. I know I enjoy it, but I agree that a workshop is a good thing to do before you dive in and invest in the kit and, maybe think, oh, actually, maybe not.
You could be the Texas Sally Man, couldn't you?
Oh my goodness.
There's something to aspire to. So with these Holgers, is there anyone out there, and I think I know the answer to this, but I don't know who does it, making wet plate backs for Holgers? Sorry, Simon, I know this isn't large format, but it's, we got onto the topic.
I don't know that you need a back.
Right.
As far as I recall, we were just putting it in there. I mean, we didn't need any special equipment. We just brought the Holga. The only thing you needed was to realize that you might have some silver stains on it afterwards. But my Holga's fine. I mean, I've used it plenty of times.
Okay.
After that, and obviously you need a cable release.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I bought a little cable release thingy from Holga Mods.
Randy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where I got it.
Yeah,
it's been a few years now. But yeah, it's a fun process, and I actually really like the tiny size. I think that making them larger, I don't know, I can't imagine pouring that collodion. I've seen people do it.
Yeah, they seem to be able to. It's like witchcraft, isn't it? They sort of pour it and it doesn't roll over their fingers. It kind of sticks to the end of the plate. Then they roll it down and wow. And then they manage to pour it into something back.
Yes. I had friends of mine in Shootapalooza were making, I think it was like 20 by 20 plates at one point. I mean, I think it took two of them to pour it.
Shootapalooza isn't a town in Texas, is it?
No. Well, it might be.
Sounds like it could be.
Oh yeah, it does.
It's one of the groups that you belong to. We can talk about that later. Yes. Shootapalooza. Yeah, love it. So, is it hot in Texas, Amy?
It is very hot. Very hot.
Is it hot as it is here in the UK?
Hotter, I hope, for all of your sakes. I don't know. I guess in Celsius, it's definitely in the 40s.
Ooh.
Oh dear.
And there's a fair amount of humidity. People talk about places that are a dry heat. I've been to places that are very hot and dry, and it's still misery, in my opinion. But and it's. I was actually planning on going out and doing some large format photography, and I attempted to go into my darkroom to load the holders and. Well, I wanted to load, this might be too much for right now, but I have a really big camera. I have a 7x17, and I wanted to take it out. It's only actually left the house once because it's really big and the case is really heavy, and I honestly have to have help with it. So I wanted to load the holders for that with paper negatives, and I got out the roll of paper and was thinking about cutting it, and before I had even really started, I was like, I can't do this. It's too hot out here. My darkroom is in my garage. So that's an extra layer of heat because the garage gets full west sun. So that little project has been put on the back burner until it is at least, I guess, in the 90s instead of the hundreds.
Well, I ventured into my darkroom a little while ago to load a roll of 120 film into a stainless steel holder, and that was fine. But I forgot to put my extractor fan on. But that just draws in hot air from outside, so it wouldn't make much difference. But it was I could feel myself starting to sweat as I was fiddling around with the 120 film.
Right. I have done it. I've spent long hours of printing sessions in the darkroom at this kind of time of year, but I don't know. As I get older, I just kind of make better decisions about how I'm going to have my suffering in my life.
Well, when you've got a young family and you're a busy lady, and we've all got other pulls on our time. There's very few of us who can just devote everything to this hobby of ours, and
Right.
And you have to make some decisions, don't you? And you can't do everything. You just have to accept. You talk about wet plate. Well, maybe one day, when you're an empty nester, you'll fill your nest with wet plates. How about that?
Yes, and I can see myself doing that, especially with wet plate photograms. That very much appeals to me.
Wow, yeah. So, Simon, have you been up to anything large format-ish?
Not even close. No, the closest I've got to being doing anything large format is shooting with a panoramic camera.
I saw that. They were great. I didn't know you had what is it, Horizon
202.
Yeah. Is that another one of your cheap pickups? That sounds wrong, doesn't it? A cheap pickup from
I only do cheap pickups. That's how it works.
Yeah, just close your ears, Amy.
Yeah.
Something you bought cheaply from an auction or somewhere?
It was a decent deal. And it's just bonkers fun. I mean, it's a Soviet camera. It's largely made of plastic, and it uses a 28mm lens. This is full 35mm film. Actually, why did we call it 35mm? I never quite got that. But anyway, but for that normal sized film, should we say, actually we can go around in circles about what normal sized film is, especially on the large format photography podcast. But so 28mm lens, so quite wide angle, but it's got a really neat trick, and that's it. It starts its photograph pointing to the right, and by the time it's finished, it's pointing to the left. Yeah. So it sweeps from the right to the left and takes in whatever's around. And you can actually change shutter speeds with it. But how that actually works, it just changes the size of the slit that's running in front of the film plane. And that's the other part of this. The film plane itself is curved. So, which is there to make some kind of attempt to deal with distortions, but it just introduces a different kind of distortion into the shots, and it's just bonkers wide. It's about 120 degrees wide, I think, maybe 140 or 120.
You'll probably find that, I don't know if it's the same as I have a 6x12 Reality So Subtle pinhole, and that's a curved plane, and many of these things are curved plane, and because the idea is to keep the same distance from the pinhole to the image plane, so you don't get a difference in density on the negative. So that's presumably that's the same with yours, is it? Is that the idea?
Sort of, I think. The difference being is though, with a curved plane with a pinhole, you've got an extremely wide angle to start off with.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't actually start off with an extreme wide angle lens.
No, you have lots of little pictures that make up a wide picture.
Precisely. It's a bit like taking lots of photographs and then stitching them together.
I'd love one of those. I guess I don't know whether it'd be called large format, but Amy, did you ever in America? Is it a thing when you leave? So when we leave secondary school, so that's when I was about 16. So whatever that is in America, so I'm awfully confused about school years in America. Then they lined up the whole of the school year, and I went to a fairly small secondary school. There was only about 350 people by the time I left. And this photographer came in, and I just remember this. I would love to have one of these things, a big camera, and it's a bit like Simon's Horizon camera, but it does a panoramic shot of the whole school, and the lens just moved around. But I think it was just a high-end version of what Simon's talking about. Do they do that sort of thing in America?
Do you mean at schools taking a picture?
Yeah.
I know. Well, I went to a very tiny school, and we did not have anyone do that. If there had been anyone taking a giant group shot, it probably would have been my dad. But with a large format banquet camera. But I know at my daughter's school, they've taken some pictures. I think they got a cherry picker, if that makes sense. You know, one of those things where they can get way up in the air. And they had someone come and make a picture of all the kids out in the front.
All looking up and waving.
Yeah, it was a really cool picture.
Yeah.
I wasn't there to see how they did it, but I know it involved, heavy equipment.
Yeah. But Simon, I think if you kept your Horizon camera level, certainly with my reality camera, keep it level, then the horizon is straight. And you do seem to have a lot of trouble keeping straight horizons.
Yeah. I think it was only about 2 shots I've taken when I actually cared about keeping the straight horizon. Because I was just generally using the extreme wide-angledness of the shot, and knowing that it was going to distort all over the place. Because even lines that are relatively straight can curve at the same time, and they can curve at different rates and so on. So the look you can get from it's very different from just simply using a wide-angle panoramic camera, which you sort of get a relatively normal-looking shot that's just particularly wide. With this, you get it just forces.
There's
distortion.
Certainly some distortion going on, isn't there, somewhere?
Yeah. And I think there's 2 ways. You either embrace the distortion, or you do your absolute best to get away from it. And there's no middle ground. It's one or the other. But it does give you a negative that's larger than the standard size. It's about half as wide again on 35mm film. If you want to hear a bit more about that, I talk about that at quite a bit of length on the Classic Lenses podcast episode 82.
We'll direct people there. I was very intrigued. Amy, we'll chat a bit later about your 7x17 camera. So I was trying to work out the ratio there, but that's probably getting close to that X-Pan. What's that, Simon? Is that
I don't know, but 7x17 sounds like the ratio.
Sounds about that right. Sounds about right, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just enormous.
Yeah.
But I was going to say about the Horizon camera. I borrowed my dad's a couple of years ago at my grandmother's birthday, and I loved it for a group shot because it meant that I could just push the button and then run and get in it by the time that it panned. By the time it panned over, I totally agree with you. Those panning cameras are really super duper fun.
Yeah. Love it.
So have you been doing anything large format, Amy, this last couple of weeks? Or was it too hot
I have not. Like I say, I loaded up. I had every intent to take that camera out, and I just couldn't get past the heat, because I thought, well, even if I can get past the heat in the darkroom, using this camera is going to require me asking someone else in my life to come out and help me haul the equipment around, and I just really can't do that to anyone right now.
That's what children are for. That's what children are for.
The tripod is pretty big and heavy as well. But I did load up a bunch of 5x7 holders, again, with the intention of taking my view camera out. And
there you go. That's at least two large format cameras you have, and I think you might have a Graflex as well. Do you still have that?
I do.
Yeah, that's 3, Simon. So that's more than me and you.
It is.
Well, all of those were gifted to me by my father. So
fantastic. I know he's been a great influence. I can see that. So you can.
Yes.
Well, I think that might be a good lead-in to
absolutely
doing a proper introduction for Amy. Actually, I think the first time I spotted you was on Emulsive. That was last year. Was it June last year?
I will admit I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels like
June
it was
6th.
longer ago, but
June the 6th.
Okay, I believe you.
That's it. Yeah.
You may have done it before that, because he takes a while to get these things out quite often, but that's when it was published.
I was very thrilled to be on Emulsive, and similarly extremely excited about this.
Oh, well, there's something to live up to then. It's all good.
Well, that was the very first photograph on that article is a self-portrait in front of a mirror with your speed graphic there.
Yes.
And without going into starting to read the article, but it does mention about how you got into photography and things. And I think this would be perhaps a good time for you to let us know about your photographic story, how you got into photography, and because we also know that you're certainly a multi-format photographer as well. So it'd be good to know what appeals to you about different formats and how you eventually ended up with the best one, being large format.
Okay. Well, I really feel like I was born into it. My father is an avid photographer, and quite frankly, I really feel like he's possibly the most talented photographer I know. I look at his prints, and honestly, I've seen a lot of silver gelatin prints other places, and I feel like my father's are better. I'm biased, but just looking at it from a perspective of, the total quality, it's a lot for me to try to live up to. I can't live up to it. So I've actually kind of quit trying, but it's always been a big part of my life because of him. When I was growing up, I absolutely loved hanging out in the darkroom with him. He has one that's also built into his garage, although it's a lot cooler than mine. His actually has walls. Mine is only plastic right now because I just haven't been able to make that final step. But he never, it's not like he forced photography on me or anything, but he gave me my first camera when I was about 7. And I remember getting it I think it was at Christmas, and I remember just feeling super excited to have this. It was a little Olympus 35 RC.
I know. I saw that, and I have one. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it is wonderful, and I still have it.
I couldn't contain my excitement when you mentioned the 35 RC.
It is a great camera,
It is.
and it's so small. When I got it back from him, because as I didn't really focus much on photography when I was 7, funnily enough, but so it sat at their house for a long time until I requested to have it back, and I was really surprised by how small it was because I remembered it being big. The rangefinder on it doesn't work, but the lens kind of you can use it still. The lens has terrific depth of field, so I have used it. It produces beautiful negatives. But I remember receiving that camera. I remember going out and making pictures with it and making prints in his darkroom, standing on a stool. Him teaching me all
How
of
old
that.
were you then when he taught you to make prints in the darkroom?
7.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Because I remember after I made my first print, it was kind of, a big celebration. Amy made her first print, and I wrote on the wall outside the darkroom in the garage. It was there forever. I wrote Amy's father's darkroom where I made my first print, and I put the date. I think it's been painted over finally, but that may have only happened a few years ago.
He clearly doesn't love you to paint over that.
Oh, it was there forever.
I think we need to get your dad on the podcast. It's that you two come on together. It sounds like you've made a great team.
But yeah, so it was always there, and I didn't really focus on it much for a long time. After that, I grew up, have a lot of memories going out with him with his various large format cameras. Something that's a really precious memory for me. He's really into trains, and anytime that he found out that a big special train was going to be coming through town, I can remember going out with him with his camera, and he would give me pennies, to lay along the track to squash. I don't know if y'all have ever done that.
That sounds a bit dangerous.
Well,
like you're trying to derail a train.
If you lay coins along the track, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but if you lay coins along the track, then after the train comes, you can go and find them, and they're all smashed.
You didn't say, look, there's a train coming, Amy, just get a bit closer.
Well, obviously this is far.
There's a pattern here with you and your father.
But I remember being out with him with his cameras and him making photographs of that. And also in Texas, especially this part of Texas, there's a lot of caves. And both of my parents are cavers, like spelunkers. And so cave photography was a very big part of my childhood.
Goodness me.
Sitting in the dark.
That wasn't large format, presumably.
Oh, no, it often was.
Really?
Yes, it often was. My father was a complete and utter lunatic with carrying, I think he has an 8x20, and he would carry that into caves and make photographs. So I guess, this is definitely where I get it from. He makes fun of me now sometimes when he hears things that I've been up to, but he's like, well, I used to be like that. So, yeah, I have a lot of memories of sitting in the dark, waiting for these photographs to be made, because he would kind of position people around the space inside of the cave with flash bulbs. Yeah. And then he would open the shutter and get people to fire at different times. And I love
he's just painting with flashlight around the caves.
Because obviously there's no natural light at all once you get down into the cave. And I love the smell of a flash bulb. It's very nostalgic for me.
I had them on. I had them on with my Polaroid land camera. I had one of the 100 series land cameras where they had the flash attachment, and you put in the little bulbs, little I think they're M series bulbs or something. I can't quite remember now. And they come in
the square thing.
No, little round bulbs. They just the flash deflector was a round thing, so it looked like one of those things from the 1950s, 40s, and 50s. But if you Google land camera flash, it took a couple of AA batteries, and you can still buy. I think you can still buy blue dot flash bulbs. You can still get them online. A lot of fun with a Polaroid with some FP100C and a 100 land camera. Great fun.
Yeah, that does sound fun.
And your father used so your father was using flash bulbs with his large format camera.
I don't think it was always large format. I don't think he carried it that far into the cave, but he would definitely carry it into I could be wrong. But I have memories of him carrying it into, at least like the mouth area where.
Was that his camera of choice, large format, or was he multi-format like you?
He was multi-format as well. He did a lot of.
Or still is. Yeah.
Yeah, he still is, as much as he can get out. He's had knee replacement surgery lately, so he's been laid up. But I feel like his most recent adventure was into large format paper negatives. Mm-hmm. I think I asked him about them at one point, and it kind of piqued his interest. And he went out. He has an 8x10. I think it's a Deerdorf. Kind of like, do you have any more of those, Dad? But he had a period where he was going out and making a lot of, photographs with paper negatives, and then he would make the contact print. My dad is extremely knowledgeable about all things.
Does he do internet stuff? Is he online at all? Can we get him on the show?
I have tried to get him to share his work online. I've gotten him on to Instagram a couple of times, and he's stayed for 5 minutes, and then he's done. He doesn't share his work a lot, but he's a tremendous resource for me. Wow. He knows everything. He mixes his own chemistry. I mean, you talk about the dry plates. I don't know if he's done that. I know that he has a lot of old glass plates from, a long time ago that he works on scanning and restoring and
goodness me,
things like that. So yeah, this is where I got it from.
Yeah, what a great dad. I wish I had a dad like that.
I think that he is probably very happy now that I have gotten into it, because he waited very patiently for a long time. When I was kind of like high school and college, I always had a camera, and I would always be the one with the camera taking pictures. Back then people didn't have cell phone cameras, thank goodness. But I never really took it seriously until I think it was the early 2000s. The point and shoot that he had given me, I think it was a Sigma point and shoot, finally died, probably because I dropped it a lot of times. But he gave me a Canon Rebel. It was like one of the just basic original Canon Rebels. And I remember being just overwhelmed with this gift. I was so excited to have a real camera that, it's funny to me now to think of that, but I started taking things seriously then. That was sort of the moment when I really got into it. And at the time I was living in the UK, and I would get the old Kodak, what was it, black and white CN, that film that you could
the C41 stuff.
Right. So you could say I could take it to Boots, or I used to take it to Jesup's.
Yeah.
And
not anymore. You won't.
Yeah, no doubt. But that was very handy for me because I wasn't in a position to develop the film myself, and I liked that I could take it anywhere to get it developed. That was when I really got into street photography, which I had no idea what street photography was. I just took pictures of some strangers and really liked the results.
Is it when you were in the UK you got the street photography bug?
I did. Well, I went to Rome for a short trip, and I just started photographing strangers there, and that was it.
Do you like to engage with people or just photograph them at arm's length?
It kind of depends upon the day. I actually think that I'm happier when I'm engaging because I don't know, maybe I feel a little less like a creep. But at the time I was so new at all of it, and I definitely was not sure of myself. So I was being as sneaky as possible. But that was what really changed it for me. And then I started I remember the first roll of Tri-X that I used, which I had probably used it when I was younger, but it's not like I remembered. And I remember I also was taking that to a lab and seeing the difference. I mean, it's very contrasty compared to that old chromogenic film. But anyway, moving forward down the timeline, I moved back to America, and I was up in New York then, and my dad gave me a Rolleiflex for my birthday.
What a wonderful dad, isn't he?
He really is.
My dad gave me a Fed 4, which I know, and I wish I still had it because I don't have him or the Fed 4 anymore, and I wish I'd have kept it. So you hold on to these things.
Oh, I will. I think he would have my hide if I got rid of that Rolleiflex. It belonged. He knew a lot of the old photographers in Waco, the old timers that had been around. And part of the reason he has a lot of historic negatives from the town. I'm from Waco, which undoubtedly most people have heard of for one reason or another. But yes. He purchased a huge amount, thousands of negatives from one of the photographers before he passed away. And so he has this huge resource of all of these historic pictures because he photographed with the paper a lot. And then another man that had been photographing in Waco for many, many years. It was after he passed away, my father, I don't know if he left everything to my father, but I remember going into his studio, which was like a rabbit warren and just stuffed with stuff. And that's where the Rolleiflex came from. So, I'm very careful. I have not dropped it. I'm very careful with it because I view it as a little part of my hometown history as well. Yeah. But I remember thinking, everybody talks about medium format. I didn't understand the hype. And then I shot my first roll of film with it, and when I developed it and saw the negatives, I was like, okay, I get it now. Goodness, the difference between 35 and 120 is just It's huge. And I love the square format. I really, really enjoyed using the Rolleiflex. I like looking down into it. I feel like, especially doing street photography, I feel like I don't have to break the space between me and my subjects by bringing a camera up to my face.
Yeah.
It feels a lot less intrusive. And I don't know, I really like composing with the square.
Is it the square or the seeing the image on the ground glass looking down, or both?
I think, well, I do like looking down, but I think for some reason a lot of the time the square just suits me better in terms of composition.
Yeah. I love it. I love it too. Somebody should make a square back for a large format camera, because that would be awesome. How about that, Simon?
It must be out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite easy though, isn't it? You just mask off your ground glass, and all of a sudden you're square there, then, aren't you? Really?
You are. You could just mask a little area off, and then you've got the.
But that is the thing. I mean, most people shooting large format, I think probably is going to be most people are shooting 4x5, which is almost square but not quite, isn't it? But
it is.
I totally get what you're saying about the square format, Amy. I mean, I have two medium format cameras, one being a Rolleicord and the other one being a Hasselblad, and I don't want to shoot at any other format on medium format. It doesn't even occur to me, although the other reason for that is, generally speaking, you go above 6x6 and the cameras just grow exponentially in size, to the point where many of them, you get up to like 6x9 and stuff like that. You're approaching large format sizes, and in many cases they're heavier than a large format camera.
Yes and no. I mean, I enjoy. I'm with you on the square format, but I do also shoot with an RB67, and I love using that camera. And I was inspired to keep using it by a wonderful documentary by Don McCullen, British former war photographer Amy Don McCullen, who now shoots. Well, he lives in the Somerset level, so he shoots very moody, atmospheric images, which I think are reminiscent of his many years in the, shooting dead people, basically, in the Vietnamese War, and the effect it had on him. And now it translates into his landscape images that he makes in and around the Somerset levels. And he put out a documentary in it, and you may be able to find it. It was certainly on the BBC iPlayer for many weeks, and it was called This England. And he's using an RB67 and then a Mamiya press camera, one of those big fugly square things. And he's just engaging with people. He's got this, he's walking around with this camera. And I thought, well, this guy's in his 80s and he's walking around with an RB67. Okay, once they stop rolling the cameras, he probably gives it to some 20-year-old. But he's just walking up to people. They don't know who he is, and mind you, he's got a film crew next to him, so maybe they just feel obliged to be nice to him. But, he's engaging with people, he's talking, and the 6x7 negatives are lovely. And Simon, the 6x9, if you go out and get yourself a GW690, they're not that heavy. There's a lot of plastic in a GW690.
Well,
it's a fairly manageable size, and 6x9's a lovely format too.
Well, that's actually just reminded me of something. I do actually have a 6x9 camera.
Of course you do.
I do, and it's a Kodak Medalist 1.
Yep. There you go. And I have a Netar 6.9 folder, which was about 30 quid, and it's beautiful. So you can slip that almost in your pocket.
Yeah.
Of your photographer's jeans.
Yeah, when I buy some. Yeah. Well, the Medalist is ace. I've got two issues with the Medalist though. One, it's been serviced, so the thing works. So that's good news. The downside is that it's 620 as opposed to 120 film, and there are some very clever people out there that probably don't do it anymore. That have actually managed to convert those, but there's very, very little tolerance in the body to be able to actually convert it to 120. So
you just need to keep your 620 spools and then just wind on some
exactly and
120 film.
That's where I am. That's where I'm at, and I just haven't had the nerve to actually go into the dark bag and re-spool them. I know the theory about how to do it. I just haven't actually.
It's easier. It might get a bit tricky doing that in a dark bag because you get the film sweats, and your hands start, especially in Texas. You don't want to be putting your hands in a dark bag. You get all sweaty but so you're rolling it on one way, Simon, then you're rolling it back again, and to get it all properly. And as long as you're careful and you watch out for the film, and you tuck it under the loose bit, you tuck it back under, and you keep pressure. You keep pressure on everything. Have you done any of all that respooling malarkey, Amy?
Well, I was going to say I have not because it kind of scares me, but. A friend of mine, I think it was Nancy Smith, who is in Shootapalooza. I have a brownie, a Kodak brownie, and that takes 620. And she was telling me that she uses one, and she just takes a pair of nail clippers and trims off the plastic lip from 120. And then if you have the 620 spool, you just use that as the take-up spool.
Yeah,
and put the 120 in there. That's what I do.
Yes, and I think that normally works. Some 620
it might not work
cameras,
in every camera.
No, I think some 620 cameras, you can actually drop 120 film straight into them, but I think that's few and far between, and some have more. Some allow you to trim the spools down a little bit.
Unfortunately, there was zero tolerance in the medalist.
Right.
It was very, very precision made.
Anyway, with a large format, dragging the subject cricking and screaming back to large format photography, following what was probably my segue, you can fit your roll format back. So, folks, you don't need anything else other than a large format camera, because if you want to shoot 35mm, you can do that in a large format camera if you wish.
They're so practical.
You can, and it's the most versatile camera ever. You can put your 120 backs on and shoot 6x9 or 6x17, in my case. So what's there not to love about a large format camera? Isn't that right, Amy?
Oh, absolutely.
So to remember that we might have had a discussion before we start recording about what happens when we go off on a tangent and trying to drag us back to the point. And I nearly said it's normally me that drags folks away from what they were talking about. But I'm not sure if it was. I think it might have been you, Amy. But you were talking something about your father's Rolleiflex that he gave you, and you got the bug for the bigger negative, didn't you? I felt that was leading slowly towards large format.
Yes, that's like a tiny preview. Well, at that point, it wasn't too long down the road from there where I actually had my own darkroom, which was just, I can't even describe. I remember when it was completed, I was so excited. I thought, I never in my life thought I would have my own darkroom. And
how many years ago was this, Amy, when the sort of timeline of things? You were 7 when you first went in the darkroom.
Right.
And how old were you when your father gifted your... no, you don't need to answer that question. How many years ago?
It might have been... It might have been 2004.
Okay. So you got the dark...
Or 2005.
You got your darkroom set up soon after that, did you?
No, the darkroom was around 2008 or 2009.
Okay.
Yeah. That was because I lived in New York City, so there's absolutely no place. Well, plenty of people do it, but for me in my life, there was no place for a darkroom. Also, not too terrible long after I got the Rolleiflex, I went through a period of my life where I didn't do a lot of photography because I was pregnant and raising an infant. And when I was pregnant, I didn't want to be around the chemicals. So also, I'm pregnant, I was tired and stuff. So after that, I was living in a house outside of the city, and I had a basement, which was perfect for the darkroom. Although it was pretty cold in there during the winter. But so I had my darkroom there, and it meant that I was finally able to start developing my own film, which was really exciting. And I had an enlarger, and I could make prints. I had the enlarger I had at the time was a condenser enlarger, which I was used to using my father's enlarger, which is he has several, of course. He does not have an 8x10 enlarger, but he does have a 5x7.
A 5x7, does he?
He does.
Oh,
But
brilliant! That's so versatile, isn't it? I have a 5x4 or 4x5, as you guys say.
well, he had, but the main one that he had that I was used to using was an Omega with the color head. I can't remember like the name of it, but it can go up to 4x5. And I actually have one of those now. A friend of his was getting rid of his darkroom, and I was able to purchase it from him. I absolutely love that enlarger, but I also have the condenser. But anyhow, so that was me. There I was, comfortable with, developing film and working in the darkroom completely unattended, which I was very excited about. But then I ended up, not very long after that, I had to dismantle the whole thing and ended up moving back down to Texas. And it was a few years after I got back that my dad gave me this huge box for Christmas with this funny smile on his face. And I opened it up, and it's a Crown Graphic.
Oh man!
And she was like,
I'm just your father. Can he not adopt me?
He's like the ultimate photographer Santa. So he was like, kind of, I've decided I think you're ready for large format now. And I thought, oh boy, okay.
You're a proper grown up now.
I know, right? It's like, I'm in my 30s and I have a child. I guess I'm grown up enough now. But it had never even occurred to me to try large format photography. But, and of course he gave me everything that I needed.
So what was in this box then, apart from, talk us through it, because it's just, I can paint a picture of unboxing. So you know how people do unboxing on YouTube?
Right. Well,
cast yourself back to this moment when your father, with this strange smile on his face, gave you this box, and as you started pulling things out.
I think when I think back to it, I believe it was probably multiple boxes, because he gave me obviously the camera and a ton of film holders, also multiple lenses. There's, of course, I can't think of the different lenses now, but I know I think there's like a 135, which is like the standard, and then 127. There's also maybe a 90, and then another one. I think there's 4. I think the 127. I think has been one of my favorites, as well as if it is a 90. I can't recall. It's a really, really beautiful lens. But so he gave me all of that, and he also gave me all of the dip tank things.
Oh, Simon! You should talk to Simon. He does things with tanks.
Yeah,
not very well. So you can give him some tips.
Well, tons of those, and tons of the holders, to put the film in, to develop it that way.
Tanks and hangers.
Yeah, hangers, that's what they're called. I told you, I don't know all the jargon. Those metal thingies.
I know all the jargon, but don't ask me too many detailed questions.
So it was basically like everything that I would need. And I already had a tripod for it, because many, many years ago, he had let me have that, because I have this kind of very cheap, tiny telescope, and that's what I had no idea it was a large format tripod that I would put the telescope on, but there you go. So yeah, he gave me everything that I needed for it. And
do you get a fancy cloth to go under,
I think he probably did give me a dark cloth.
You weren't tempted to use it handheld then, because you can. Did it come with like a rangefinder and stuff? Because some of those do have looking rangefinders.
Yes, and he spent a lot of time calibrating
the
rangefinder, but I think it might only be calibrated. I know when you switch lenses, you're kind of out of luck. It's only maybe calibrated. Oh, no, actually he did. Now that I think about it, I know he put a lot of distance markers, and he showed me like where to use the, when you fold down the front of the camera, and it's got the stuff on it for where you can pop up those little metal thingies for where you need to sort of set it depending on what lens you use.
Infinity stops.
Yeah, that's what they're called. So I think, and he wrote some distance scales on there as well. But I tend to not use it handheld. I very much prefer using it on a tripod. Honestly, I feel like if I'm using it handheld, I would rather just use my my Rolleiflex or my Hasselblad, because I'm like, why I don't have to do this. And developing the film is so much more difficult. So
it seems to have a lot of folks really have the handheld bug for 4.5, and there are some, well, at least one sort of camera that's made specifically for hand holding. But like you, it's never really excited me. I thought, well, I'll just go out with a Rolleiflex or a Holger even,
right.
or anything else but a large format camera. When I go out with a large format camera, it's about that process. It's about the meditation. It's about some me time and all of that. And it slows me right down, all those things.
There is, of course, the Camera Dactyl OG, though.
That's what I was thinking of.
Oh, I thought you were thinking about a Speed Graphic.
No, I was thinking the Camera Dactyl OG is one that's made at the moment.
Yeah. That to me sounds like a load of fun, especially with the wide angle lens.
Yeah, it's small enough and light enough, I guess, but I don't know. I'm still not all that. See, I'm normally drawn by all that sort of stuff, but I'm, as much as I like the look of it, I wouldn't see myself using a handheld. Are you familiar with a Camera Dactyl OG, Amy?
Yes, and I have managed to keep myself from buying one.
Oh, you're tempted, are you? So there you go.
I've been very tempted. I wanted one of the other large format cameras that he was making, just because they had cute, fun colors.
He's been on. Ethan was on the podcast a few shows back, so
yes,
dive back and have a listen. And he'll sell you some photographer's jeans as well.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think he wrote something, I believe it was on the OG for the Film Shooters Collective website as well. Okay. So yeah, very tempted. But I agree with you. For me, the whole point of large format photography is using the ground glass and going slowly. That's one of the things that I love about it, really, because I enjoy, for me, normally I'm photographing people. It's like street photography, that kind of thing. But I've never been all that into landscapes and other stuff. But large format photography opens me up to that. And I really appreciate that about it, that it's like, well, now I can enjoy this. Not that I'm particularly successful with it, but hauling the camera through some landscape and setting it up and taking the time. That's what it's all about for me, which is why I think, well, why would I do handhelds? It takes all of that beautiful process away.
Have you thought of combining your love of photographing on the street with large formats, by, for instance, setting up your camera in an interesting area and just say to people, could I take your picture with this weird camera?
I have taken it out on the street a few different times. I think I even hauled it with me on a couple of road trips. I have some photographs that I made in Nashville. It attracts a lot of attention when you whip out one of those large format cameras on the street. People are definitely...
people are tripping over the tripod. And
right. I haven't thought about doing that sort of thing before, like, inviting people to get in front of it. But I have taken it out. When I did, the only time that I have taken out the 7x17, I took it to this graffiti wall in Austin. And it definitely attracted a great deal of attention. I had lots and lots of people looking under the dark cloth. But I like that about it. Anybody that expresses any interest, I'll definitely tell them anything that they want to hear about it. And, kids love to look under the dark cloth as well.
Simon, have you set a large format camera up in a place other than a semi-deserted landscape, or have you ever set one up in a town, fairly busy town centre?
No, I've not. Although it does appeal to me. Although it's this thing, I guess. I mean, I'm not a street photographer by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, you can photograph landscapes.
No, you can, yeah. I'm
not
just,
landscapes.
I'm just thinking about what the question you put to Amy there, and I can see why shooting large format for street could produce some incredible results, but I can also see why it's not massively appealing in terms of, if you are shooting people in a busy street, you want to be able to actually move. Well, generally speaking, you want to move quickly, which obviously that isn't going to happen. But you can put yourself in a busy place, an interesting busy place as well. But you're then going to be restricted about how many photographs realistically you're going to actually take. Whereas you're using roll film, then you can. Sometimes you might want to actually take quite a lot of photographs, and you're just going to be limited by how many dark slides you can.
Well, I think you just have to go out with that mentality, don't you? I mean, you can go out with a dozen dark slides, can't you, and have 24 pictures. That's okay.
And I just call them dark slides, and I should really call them film holders.
Yes, we know what you mean.
Yes,
we know what you mean.
Yeah, but in terms of going out in public places, I've not really been out into too many places where there've been that many people around me. Although I think the place where where the most people that have never seen one before was when we did World Pinhole Photography Day back in, was that March? Was that April?
Yeah,
and we did that at the Six Towns Photography Club,
which meets weekly now.
Which now meets weekly, and although that the Six Towns is mainly. It's just general photography, whereas every Tuesday night we do a darkroom evening. But this was on a Sunday, and we managed to gather in quite a few people. And I thought, well, I'm going to set this up and just have it pointed out the window into the courtyard that there is there. That sounds a lot grander than it actually is, by the way. And it was great to see people's reactions. I mean, everybody that was coming in there had some interest in photography, and they all were gravitated towards seeing what was going on through this large format and seeing everything upside down, and everybody was impressed by it. You can't not be if you're vaguely interested in photography. You can't not be impressed by looking through a well focused, bright ground glass screen, can you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I took my favorite experience with that was there's an artist whose name I absolutely cannot recall, but the artist makes these big stick sculptures. It's kind of like structures out of sticks, and then they're just left to sort of deteriorate over time. And I had seen one in my hometown, and I found out that there was one in Austin. So, of course, I wanted to go and photograph it. And I took my view camera, and I saw that there was a group of kids, a sizable group of kids there with their mothers. And I thought, oh, I hope this doesn't make them uncomfortable, this woman setting up this big camera. But and I was kind of thinking about asking them if any of the kids wanted to look under the dark cloth, and I'm under the dark cloth thinking about this, and I look up and they're all assembled in front of my camera. Like, hello, we are a homeschool group and we are very interested in what you are doing. So I ended up sort of teaching an impromptu 10-minute lesson on.
Well, I think homeschool mums, or moms as you would probably say, are probably always on the lookout for an educational opportunity.
Right.
Because I know some, and a trip around the local supermarket is an educational experience. So they would have seen that and said, "Look, over you go and talk to her."
Right. Well, they're all very attentive and very interested, and it's fun to show people the holder and explain that is the size of the piece of film. A lot of, and I love presenting film photography in general to kids. I love kids, and I love teaching anyway, but because a lot of them have never seen it before, and I've had opportunities at my daughter's school to go up and set up a table. They'll have like an arts day, and I always make sure to take some. I have a roll of 35 millimeter negatives that are destroyed that I use especially for this purpose, so they can touch it and see it. And I always take a large format camera so they can look at that. And I have pieces of film that have accidentally gotten exposed, so they can touch that as well. I think it's great to.
Do you do any cyanotype stuff with them? Have you done that sort of stuff with kids?
I haven't done it with them. I've kind of showed it to them. I mean, I've done it with my daughter and her friends as much as I can get their attention. Oh, well, I guess now that I think about it, I did help out at a kind of children's science museum type place with a cyanotype day that they had, and there were lots of kids there. It was just really fun. I really enjoy presenting that kind of thing to people of all ages. But yeah, the camera, like those cameras really do attract a lot of attention. So I guess if you take it in an urban place, you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, I set up a 4.5 camera in the middle of Norwich, which is a fairly big city in the UK, I guess. And it wasn't an overly busy part of it. I had a couple of friends with me who were acting as models, and I was under the dark cloth, and one of my friends to the left saying, "You're getting some really weird looks." But actually, nobody did actually come up. I was most disappointed. I was ready to answer some questions, but nobody came up.
Oh, too shy, baby.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, no, I've taken it. I made a couple of road trips with my family this past summer. I did not take my large format camera on purpose because I had, probably 15 other cameers with me as it was. But
why didn't you leave all of those behind and just take a large? Think of it. Your 7x17 camera. The discipline of just having that camera with you. Now I've seen. You shot some I-type Polaroids, and I know you've shot pinhole when you went to these wonderful places in the forest and camped. Think of the beautiful images you've missed by not having your 7x17 camera and all of the distractions that you've had with these 15 cameras. Why did you take 15 cameras with you? Come on, answer yourself.
Well, it would help
account for it.
If it would help if I had more than 3 holders for the 7x17.
Okay.
I think my family
you can have a changing tent, can't you?
Yeah, there we go. Just set up a little darkroom. Maybe one day if we ever have some sort of an Airstream or something. But no, I have definitely taken my large format camera. I've had it on the beach. I've used it in all sorts of extremely difficult and frustrating situations with lots of wind, and it's always worth it. I'm actually going to the beach this coming weekend, and I am taking my large format camera.
You see, I'd be a bit scared really with all that. Aren't you worried about sand and wind and salt spray and goodness knows what?
No. I feel like, these cameras are old. Who knows what else they've been through. I as long as I don't drop it
in the sand.
The ground, yeah. I think it'll be okay. I have the other large format camera that I have, and I do think that I still love the chronographic the best, in part because I have a wider range of lenses for it, and also it's just...
And it was given to you by your dad, wasn't it?
It was. Well, he's given me all of them, but...
It's like your first crush, you always have a thing for your first boyfriend or girlfriend, and... That's always going to have a place in your heart, Amy, is that Rolleiflex and that chronographic.
Oh, for sure. But the chronographic, I think, is such a great large format camera because it's very compact. It just folds up into this little box, and it's not that heavy, and it doesn't take very long to set up. You just kind of like pop open the front and pop off the back, and you're ready to go.
What sort of adjustments and things do you have with the chronographic?
Do you mean in terms of like the movements and stuff?
Yeah.
There's a lot fewer. You can't. Again, I don't know the names. You can kind of move the lens up and down, but you can't go. Mm-hmm. You can't tilt it. I don't know that you can tilt it at all.
I'm just going to say, I think that might be good timing to read out one of our emails out.
I was very professionally leading up to it, and you've outthought me. So should I read it out to you? Because this is very much to do with press cameras, and Amy
Okay.
Can chip in or not as she feels fit. So Graeme Young, one of the three amigos of the Homemade Camera podcast, sent an email to... No, he didn't. Did he send it to the dedicated? He sent it to your email, didn't he? But do we have a dedicated large format email address?
We do. It's large format photography podcast at gmail.com. But okay. Graeme was naughty because he sent it to us via a group he had set up in Instagram.
He did.
And just actually a word of warning to anybody that wants to communicate with us and potentially get an email or message onto the show, please send it via email rather than the other places we're out there, because there's a very good chance we'll just completely forget about it if it's not on email. So,
or it just becomes a running, not joke really, but we've got one that we've been trying to read out for the last 6 months, I think.
Yeah.
So just read out that email address again, Simon, for me.
That's large format photography podcast at gmail.com.
There we go. So the aforementioned Graeme Young writes this question for your next podcast. My next press camera, of which we discussed press cameras probably in issue episode 1 or 2, as much as we could, which wasn't very detailed. But it's certainly what Amy's got, that sort of style of possibly handheld large format camera. My press camera has a drop bed feature. So he says the bed can angle downward by about 15 degrees. What is the advantage of this movement? It already has quite a wide range of tilt. So I don't know what press camera he has, Amy, but he suggests that his press camera, the front lens board will tilt forward. I would imagine yours would too.
It might. I mean, I don't use movements much. That's not something that I have really gotten into.
The front tilt can be useful. It's about the only movement I ever use as well, really. Just forgetting that it just gives you that. We won't go into the technicalities of it because there's been a few of them and we don't really understand it. But it involves beer mats, Amy, or, coasters.
Uh-huh.
You have to have a coaster to work out the plane of focus. But it effectively shifts your plane of focus from right by your toes to the far distance. So,
well, I think one of the things here, though, I think it's a crime graphic is got. And that's
what Amy's got as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I've got a
Meridian.
I think.
You've got a baby one, haven't you?
I have a baby speed, which I thought I was buying a speed graphic, but I ended up with a baby speed instead.
Oh, whose fault was that?
Perhaps one day it will grow into a full speed graphic.
Somebody keep feeding it.
Feed it lots of film.
Prunes.
It's small but perfectly formed, and
like you.
but no, I think it has the same mechanism. And when I came to use it, I was thinking, where's the front tilt? Because it doesn't front tilt, and I don't know if yours front tilt at all. But this baby speed, you got rear. Well, the front standard will tilt backwards, so you got rear tilt on the front standard, and then I don't know if I worked it out for myself or saw something, but it was a case of I realised that. It had you could drop the bed, as Graeme has mentioned, and
so the bed is the bit where the whole mechanism, where the standards slide out and backwards and forwards. That slidey thing on the bottom of the camera is called the bed.
You can drop. Okay, yeah.
That's just to clarify things really simply, Simon.
Yeah.
The bed is that when you're talking about the bed, because people might not know what you're talking about.
That's very true.
That thing slide along.
I did it.
There you go.
I don't know. I mean,
I think it does. It drops forward. It drops down, Amy.
Yeah, it drops down. I thought it was just to get it out of the way, but
it is. I think you've just answered his question.
Well, partially.
That may not be the proper answer. I mean, my entire knowledge of movements come from me saying to my dad, why would you want to do this? And him saying, well, you can make a building stand up straight.
That's it.
Yeah. So that's the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah. Well, so yes, it will drop forward, and my first thought about doing that was if you're using a wide angle lens, you could then move it out of the way.
Your 90, Amy, for instance. Maybe, or perhaps
might get
wider
away
than
with
that.
it.
You might get away with that, but 65 or something.
Yeah, anything
65
wider.
or 70, which is getting into the sort of 20 millimeter 35 equivalent, I suppose, that sort of area, somewhere around there.
Yeah, but what was interesting when I did this on the speed graphic. Actually, you know what? I might have seen Mikhail Tekel doing it with a MPP camera, which I think has got a similar kind of arrangement.
It's probably the same, isn't it?
Yeah, and what happened though is that you drop as you drop it, it then would tilt the lens forward, and I thought, oh, you've immediately got forward tilt by dropping the bed. And then, but the thing is, you would also
is that how yours works, Amy? So if that bed drops forward, does the front lens panel go with it, so it ends up pointing downwards, or can it stay upright?
I don't think I know the answer to that. I feel like when I dropped it forward, it didn't move that much, but it might.
It's going to be.
I can go get it.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Don't worry about that. I think it depends on the position of where the front standard is. I mean, certainly if you're shooting the wide angle, then it's going to be pretty
close
much back in the box anyway.
Yeah.
But if it's a longer lens, then it would be sitting on the bed, and then therefore it would.
That's a very good point, Simon. That's a very good point.
Right, because it's attached.
That's it. But then the next thing is, because I was wondering, why is it only got rear tilt? You know, because front tilt's more useful than rear tilt. Well, as soon as you've dropped that bed, then it's then pointing forwards, and then you can use the rear tilt to square it back up, or to give you front tilt if you want. But you've also got to raise the standard as well, because you effectively drop it down a little bit when the bed drops. It drops as well, so so you raise it back up, so you get a normal amount of so you're parallel to the film plane, but you've then got some adjustments effectively on the front standard then to move it forwards or backwards. It's
probably one of these things that is easier for you to demonstrate to us. And maybe on our new YouTube channel, you could do a demonstration, Simon. How about that?
Well, there you go.
Involving beer mats.
That's a good time to mention our wildly successful YouTube channel. I'm not sure if we've actually mentioned this or not, but we have a large format photography podcast YouTube channel. So if you type in large format photography podcast, you will actually see some output on there, but you will, fortunately you will not see any of us. So we do not appear in any of these. It's just audio only. But if anybody wants to listen to the podcast with captioning, so in some way that there's some clever software that will actually convert what we're saying into words underneath. So anybody that's struggling to understand our accent, or English isn't their first language and such, then that's a good way to work out what on earth we're talking about.
So we answered Graham's question or not? I'm not really sure.
I think we did. We sort of did anyway.
Is it primarily we're using wide angle lenses so you don't end up photographing the bottom of the bed or the front of the bed? I
think it's twofold. I think one, if you do use something wide angle, then it makes sure that it is out of the way, although it's questionable whether that's truly necessary or not. And it'd only probably be in portrait orientation where you'd actually have that issue. But with a longer lens, it will enable you to have front tilt in a way that you don't normally have it.
Well, there you go. Anyway, Graeme, there you go, mate. I think you probably already knew the answer to the question, but it's very nice of you to engage with us, and because Amy's got one of these cameras, so it's all good stuff.
I was just going to say he also, like quite a few other people, he's managed to studiously avoid large format.
That's true.
Until listening to us. So
maybe I was being a bit harsh. Maybe you didn't know the answer to that question. But you're right. I did see him. He did post a picture of his press camera saying it's our fault, the large format photography podcast, that he's now got into large format photography.
And that's
and a Crown Graphic is definitely a gateway camera.
Yes.
So we covered this in an earlier podcast, but not, you're not, folks listening, you're not obliged to go back and listen to diligently to after whittering on for hours and hours. The speed graphic is the one that people tend to gravitate towards, because that with the speed graphic you can then use those older, slower lenses because it has a shutter curtain in the back. That's right, isn't it, Simon?
That's right, yeah. Focal plane shutter.
Focal plane shutter, if it works. And I think you wind it up to different tensions to get different speeds, maybe.
Yes, I've seen one. I had one. I can't remember.
Did you?
Why.
Did your dad give you one?
Well, he might have given it to me, and then I gave it back because it was kind of heavy, and I wound it. And I looked at how it worked, and I thought, no, I don't want this.
If you've got one of those lovely old Petzval lenses or something, the old brass portrait lenses, and you haven't got or any lens with no shutter, then you can. People use these Aero Ektar lenses. They were the fashionable ones, the aircraft focusing reconnaissance lenses.
Right.
So you had one, didn't you, Simon, or something similar?
I do have one, but it's still not in a serviceable condition, and I don't have a camera that I can mount it on either. So I may as well.
You'll have to build one.
Yeah.
Why don't you build one to suit?
And with a focal plane shutter, that's the tricky bit.
So, Amy, you had your Crown graphic given to you, which is one of your early loves. What was your progression? So, how did you? Well, let me just before we go on to that. What sort of things did you find yourself shooting with your Crown graphic, and then tell us about the next camera along in the large format journey?
Well, I definitely photographed, especially at the beginning. Well, a big problem that I had at the very beginning with large format photography, because I feel like there's just, the larger you get, the larger the
Bigger
number of errors that you can make. With sheet film, it just grows exponentially. But I did not. I had no idea how to load the holders. I purchased some film. I got just some of the more inexpensive, if there is such a thing with large format, the Arista film. And I asked my dad, what direction, how do I load it? And he said, well, the notches go on the top right.
As you look at it.
Well,
as you hold it up in front of you.
Well, yes, he says top right. I thought, okay, well, for months, I think I blew through an entire box of film, and the negatives were so thin, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And then one day I was in the dark room. I went to their house, and I was in the dark room with him, and he showed me, I was like, well, show me how you load it. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, and I was loading it backwards. His definition of top right, my interpretation of top right was incorrect. So I'd been shooting through the back of the film, and that was a funny moment. We both laughed really hard when we realized, because he was like, I just can't figure out. He was helping me. He was because I'd been using D76, and he was like, oh, maybe you need a better developer. He's like, this is how my father does things. He does things properly. He runs a test, with the gray cards, and, to determine what's your actual film speed in this camera, and how much time you need for development, and what ISO should you really be shooting it at. Whereas I just kind of load the thing and wing it.
This is, Simon, what we touched on with Richard Pickup. So he's talking about it's not about pushing or pulling film. It's about determining your own exposure index, which is what Amy's father's doing.
Yes,
so he's choosing a film and determining by testing where he's getting his correct shadow detail in his zone 3 area. And then if it means his FP4 becomes 80 instead of 125, well, that's what he shoots it at.
Yes, and it makes your life a lot easier if you actually go to that effort. My dad always tends to be right about all of these things. And slowly it's getting through my thick skull that, yes, actually running tests with each camera is probably the best way to go, because you're just a lot less frustrated.
If you haven't got much time on your hands, you just go out and have some fun. That's probably what most of us do.
Yes, that's definitely what I do. But in the process of running these tests with him, discovered that the problem was that I was loading it backwards. But what was really good, the terrific outcome of that, besides me just learning how to load the film properly, was I started using a different developer. I used DK50, which he's been mixing it for me because he actually has all the powdered chemistry. But I have it now. That's his most recent gift to me, was lots and lots of chemistry. So I can mix it myself. And I've get terrific results. That's what I use for my sheet film. I don't know if you can buy it in a bag.
No, I think it's probably a published formula. I'll go and look it up. It rings bells.
Right.
You piqued my interest now to see what sort it is.
Yeah, I get terrific contrast. It just does everything that I want.
And you're shooting that primarily still with Arista film, are you?
No, I usually use Ilford. I would like to use Tri-X, but I just can't afford it.
Which Ilford are you using?
HP5. But I personally rate it at 200.
There you go. Me too.
But I do have some Arista film in 5x7. That's terrific. Someone gave it to me. I think she ordered the wrong thing by mistake and sent me all of this 5x7 film. I know. Like, wow, that's tremendous.
That's lovely. It is.
I know.
Yeah. I think Arista film, is that one? I don't know if we see that over here. I might be wrong, but is that one that you find in places like Freestyle and B&H?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know.
Is it something to do with Freestyle?
I think it might be.
Somebody out there listening to the podcast, just remind us about Arista film. Post something when you've listened to us rattling on.
I think it's intended to be like a student film, but it's terrific. It's definitely.
It might be Fomapan.
It could be. But there's nothing studenty about Fomapan because that can be quite tricky to master.
But it's cheap.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Or Shanghai. Some of those Shanghai films are, there could be one of those rebranded.
I think it's just more student prices.
Yeah, but some of those Chinese ones, the Shanghai film, that's cheap as chips, and Fomapan is cheap. Well,
I've heard good things about it.
Yeah. Anyway, not to worry.
But anyhow, so yeah, that was, learning how to load the film properly at last was a big leap forward for me.
Just go back to that, Amy, because, for new people just finding us and perhaps thinking about, or for Graeme Young, how to load sheet film. And what are we talking about with notches on the film? Simon, would you like to explain that? Or Amy, would you like to explain it?
Well, I know that every film stock has its own unique set of notches.
Yeah.
Kodaks are kind of pointy, like teeth.
Hilfers are a combination of like round bits and square bits, aren't they? In different orders.
And Arista has just, I think, the one little half circle, like round thing.
Okay. I think I've got a feeling Foma has one little circle, so that maybe Simon's right.
Well, I've just found somebody who's just somebody called Josh Harmon Images has put some pictures up which are very, very good, and it's got Fomapan 100 and then in brackets Arista EDU 100.
There we go.
Now I knew I'd come across sheet film with one little circular notch in, and I knew it wasn't Kodak, so the only other film I've used is Foma, so it must be that.
Right. It's thinner. It feels thinner than like Kodak Tri-X.
It can be quite contrasty, but maybe
it's a terrific film. I think as long as you're using it properly and using a good developer, it's a beautiful
I use it a lot. I'm actually right out of it at the moment, but it's probably the film that I'll be using most of, along with a bit of FP4.
Right.
So what about loading it then? How do you, where does your notch have to be, Amy, for those new to all this?
Well, if you're...
Try and describe it.
Because now I'm on the spot. Hopefully I say the right thing. But my definition, so top, what my father meant by top right was top as in you're looking at the film holder and the little metal thingy.
The little thing that you lift up to put the film in.
You pull it out is at the top. I was thinking of it as on its side, I guess, with that, how you would stick it into the camera to do a landscape.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why I was putting the notches.
So you're holding the sheet film holder in front. If you were holding it in front of you in portrait format with the little flappy thingy at the top. So you're holding it in your left hand in that orientation. Then you've got your film also in portrait mode in your right hand, say, if you're right-handed? Where would the notches be?
The notches would go on the right-hand side.
Top right, yeah.
So the way that I load it, I hold it in landscape orientation.
Yeah, me too.
I slide the film in that way, and which means that the notches need to be like at the bottom.
Bottom right.
Right.
Bottom left.
No, bottom right.
Oh.
Yeah, bottom. Yeah, I put it in. Well, I put it in from the right.
If you're sliding it from right to left, then it would end up being, because all you're doing is moving the film holder through 90 degrees to the right, aren't you?
Right. But this is so important. I mean, you'll still get an image, but you'll frustrate yourself.
That's what Simon's been doing wrong.
Well, I've been using bottom left.
Well, it's wrong.
Seriously?
Well, actually, no, it won't.
No, it's the opposite.
Will it?
But that's because I push upwards into it rather than
if you're
drop
pushing
down
up,
to.
Yeah, as long as so, if you're holding the film in your right hand, see what a great topic we've opened up. If you're holding the film in your right hand, and you're holding it in portrait mode, and you can feel the little notches to the top right, facing you as the emulsion. Now, how you then put that into the sheet film holder is up to you. If you feed it from right to left, then automatically, the notches will appear under the gate. If you push it in the other way, the notches will appear not under the film gate. So my notches always appear under the film gate because, like Amy was saying, I would pull a little gate down, little gate thingy, and slide the film in with my right hand. So your notches appear under the gate. Whereas I think Simon, if you slide your notches in the other way, as long as you've still got the emulsion facing you, it doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, but it's just the same. There's no difference. It's just the orientation of the holder.
I know.
Yeah. So
are you left-handed? Are you left-handed then?
No.
You're just cack-handed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I move it up into it rather than.
Well, that's okay. That's
or from the.
But if you're holding the surely, Amy's with me on this. The easy thing to do, if you've got the film in your right hand, if you're right-handed, and to identify the notches, why would you do anything other than just slide it in so that the notches are the last bit to go in the holder? Why would you turn it round?
I don't turn it round.
Don't you? Oh, you just offer the.
You slide it in from the bottom.
You're offering it up, and you're just pushing it in that way. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the
That's
orientation.
Weird. I think we should start a poll on the Facebook group as to who's right.
But if the holder is on the left hand side and I'm holding the film with the right, and I'm pushing from the right to the left, then it's still in the bottom right hand corner.
That's right. You said bottom left a minute ago.
Did I?
Yeah.
You did.
Yes, and that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, listeners, Simon's just confusing everybody now.
No. I need to finish this. I mean, what I just said there. But yes, if you reorientate that clockwise through 90 degrees, and I'm pushing upwards, then it becomes in the bottom left.
Yeah, whatever you say.
Yeah.
Let's move on very quickly.
I thought it would be a really good idea to explain loading film for beginners, and we've gone and confused everybody. I tell you what, listeners, just go on YouTube. That'll be it, won't it?
Yeah.
But I found it have you ever been in that situation, Amy? Because I don't use too many different films. I use mainly FP4 and Fomapan. Sometimes I've had some HP5. But I have come across, and normally I write on the little white bit with a pencil what film is loaded in there. That's what I do, and then I rub it off with an eraser rubber. But I have come across film, and if I'm not sure if it's loaded, if there's film in there or not, normally I'm fairly sure by the orientation of the dark slide. So in my case, if it's showing light white instead of black, for me it means it's unexposed. But I have found film in these. I've gone in the darkroom just to double check, and there's film already in there, but I don't know what it is because I've forgotten. So the notches is always a good way, and I keep 2 or 3. I now keep an example of FP4, Foma, and HP5 because I can never remember, just pinned to a board in the darkroom. So if I do get that, I can just look at the notch code and see which it is. Or you can go online. I think you can find these notch codes online or in some of the large format books.
Oh, it's bound to be there. I only really I only use Ilford or the Arista or Foma, as it might be, but I develop them both the same. So I used to label them. I would actually put a piece of tape on there and just write it, but I don't label them anymore since I developed them the same. I think, well, it doesn't matter anyway.
Well, this DK50 must be, must be flexible enough to handle it, or maybe the times are just broadly similar. In fact, they probably are. I think Foma I'm developing in ID 11 1-to-1. I'm probably developing that somewhere around 8 to 9 minutes, and certainly with HP5 normally I'm about 9.5 minutes. So doing it, if you did them both at sort of 9ish, they'd be fine. So you can get away with all sorts of things, really.
Right.
And if your DK50 is a sort of fairly forgiving developer,
it must be.
Yeah.
But I think
HP5, of course, is one of those your flexible friend, isn't it?
Right. I think with any film, I think that consistency is a good pathway to success in terms of like working really hard to meter things the same, like, do everything as similarly as you can with every single time. Every time that I do large format, I have one specific meter that I use, and I kind of do it the same way, and I always rate the film the same.
What's your metering technique, Amy?
Well, it's different with large format than with other things. I have I guess it's an incident meter. I do not use a spot meter for a large format, but I just kind of walk over and I get close to the darker area and kind of wave the thing around and go with whatever it tells me.
Okay.
It's not super exact.
That's always going to err you on the safe side, because it's going. If you're metering in those darker areas, it's going to indicate a more generous exposure, which is generally better than having too little exposure. Absolutely,
especially with large format. I mean, I personally prefer a denser negative to a thinner one. It just makes my life easier. But that's what I do with all of my large format.
And you're simplifying you're not a member of the Film a Week club, so you're keeping to one at most 2 films. So that's giving you some consistency as well, isn't it?
Right. And I feel like by doing that, and I mean, I do that. I pretty much only shoot Tri-X with the smaller formats, although sometimes I use Ilford. But I feel like just that consistency. But
you're a street photographer. Why would you not use Tri-X?
But I feel like the consistency has definitely been my friend. Just like sticking to one thing. This works. It takes it takes a lot of the variables and wild cards out of the equation for me.
And there are enough of those to worry about in large format photography. So why make?
Oh yes, I mean, I honestly have so much trouble with scratching the film, the negatives, or somehow managing to take a chunk out of the emulsion. I don't know how I do that. I don't know if it's like in the loading process or the developing process.
I tell you what I've had a problem with recently, and I've had it with the last lot of Foma 100 I've had, and I've never had a real problem with Foma. I've noticed I was making a print and I was noticing these not light spots, which are dust, but black spots. And when I look at the negative, I see some tiny little holes in the emulsion. And when I Google that, people talk about it can be down to the acid stop bath. Well, I don't use an acid stop bath. I never have done. You go from developer to a few changes of water. And so I don't know whether that's an emulsion fault or some other idiot mistake I'm making.
I will tell you, what I think that it probably is dust that's on the negative when it goes into the developer. That has been my experience. For that
now,
reason,
I do dust out the film holders.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to have it.
But using a brush, you probably end up then you could introduce static charge to it, can't you? So that would then attract dust. My darkroom isn't always dust free, I have to say. I mean, occasionally I'll go in there and look at the top of the enlarger and I see dust has settled in there. So
Right. Yeah, I think it's really hard to keep, to have no dust with it. Because I have all of those dip tanks and stuff, but I haven't been using them. I tray process my sheet film.
okay.
So I do with 4x5. Sometimes I'll do 4 at a time, but I tend to do no more than 4.
Do you keep when you're doing that in a tray? Do you have a dedicated space for each of your 4 sheets and try not to let them overlap each other, or do you not worry if they all kind of overlap each other?
No, I put them in there. I put them in there one at a time, and then I just kind of because I do constant agitation, and I kind of shuffle them.
Right.
Every few kind of, I just kind of tilt, agitate the tray by tilting it constantly, kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but so I'll just pick it up and put it behind. I just constantly cycle them.
So you're working in complete darkness, so you couldn't really see what's happening, could you? Anyway,
No.
unless you've got your fingers stuck in there.
Well, I keep my hands in it. So, but what I do to try to combat the dust is I put it in a water bath first. So in complete darkness, obviously. That also removes that, whatever it is, the anti-halation layer, that blue stuff. It's always, my fingernails are always stained after I've been doing this, but I put it in the water first and soak it for a little bit to try to get any dust that might be on the negative off of it. But I mean, it's not perfect.
Yeah, you see, well, I do. So your theory, which I thought you were on the money there with dust, but then I'm using 2 types of 4.5 developing tanks. One is the Stearman Press 445 4-sheet tank that takes just under 500 milliliters. And then I use a Mod 45, Mod 54, whichever the insert is that goes in the Patterson 1 liter tank. But I use a water bath in both cases. I always have done. Some people say you don't need to, but I've always done so because I like to see that color disappear.
Right.
So presumably dust would get washed off in that phase, wouldn't it?
You would think so. I mean, I still have some though, which is part of the reason why I've started doing contact prints.
Okay. Tell us about your
because I feel like it's more forgiving when you enlarge it. You can really see those black.
Well, if you're using, you mentioned earlier, and I was going to try and find a time to slip it back in. You mentioned condenser enlargers, and then you mentioned your other one, which by definition would probably be a diffuser enlarger.
Right.
The condenser, of course, will show up. It's a different kind of, a more harsh light, if you will.
Yes.
So it shows up dust, scratches, and general negative crap, doesn't it?
Yes.
More so than an enlarger with a color head, where scratches and marks generally fade into the distance.
Yeah. But yeah, there's just so much room for so many types of errors. I mean, I've even, obviously not had very clean hands and kind of had chemical mess along the edge of some of my negatives. I'm just like, well, I just go with it, But
so tell us about your contacting printing journey. What?
Well, part of the reason that I wanted to start doing that was because the next camera that my dad gave me was a Kodak 33A view camera, which I have. I can do both 4x5 and 5x7 with it, and it's a lot more fiddly to set up.
Is it a wooden thing?
It's a wooden thing, and you have to fold down the front end, or you have to fold down the back and kind of screw the thing in. And it's great though. I enjoy using it. The process is even slower, and it's bigger and heavier than the Crown Graphic. So
and 5x7. So if I had one of those, I'd just shoot 5.7 because why would you not really? But 5.7 is supposed to be, that's almost ideal format because the cameras are smaller than 8x10, and it's a big enough difference in size to make beautiful contact prints. Although you can make beautiful contact prints with any size negative really if you wish. But 5.7. Is that how you use it more in the 5.7 format?
Yes, I do. A lot of the time, if I'm taking it out and I'm really going to do like a bunch of large format, I'll take both because, I'm carrying all this stuff around. Like I'll take, why not? And also I know that the 4x5 negatives I can enlarge if I want to, whereas the 5x7, my only option is
contact
printing. But
or scanning, or maybe scanning.
Oh, you know what? I don't scan them. My scanner, it just takes so long to scan one of those 5x7s that what I prefer to do is to make the contact print and then I'll just scan that.
Yep.
And I haven't done as much contact printing as I would like, mainly because it's been hot and I only have so much time to spend in the darkroom anyway. I really enjoy it. I feel like for some reason it feels less labor intensive to me than doing enlargements. But I'm kind of lazy with it too. I don't really do a test strip. I just lay it on there and kind of make a guess.
You're still using your enlarger or using a separate light source?
I am using my enlarger, and so I have a ton of photographic paper. I'm pretty lucky. Like many years ago, the camera store that was in Waco that had been there forever. I mean, I'm talking like 100 years, forever, something like that. Went out of business, which is very sad because now Waco has no film processing or anywhere to get darkroom supplies or anything. But when they were going out of business, of course, this place was like a staple in my childhood. I went there with my dad all the time, and he went and the two of us bought up a whole ton of photographic paper that they were getting rid of at, seriously bargain prices. So I have a bunch of this RC pearl paper because, of course, at those prices, I was going to buy it, whatever it was. I thought I'll figure out a way to make it work. And I don't really like it for enlargements. For whatever reason, I guess it's just like the texture of the paper. I don't like it, but I think it makes absolutely beautiful contact print.
Is it Ilford, Amy?
It's Ilford, yeah. RC pearl,
multigrade pearl. Yeah, it's very popular. It's the surface that's between matte and gloss in resin coated.
Right. And I think it makes really beautiful contact prints, which I'm very happy to have found something that I like using it for because I have a lot of it. But recently, my dad gave me, and I put something on my blog about this, a huge box of this Azo paper, which I don't think they make anymore. I think it was a Kodak product, I believe.
AZO.
Yes. And he told me, I don't think that he knew a great deal about it. He told me that you could use it in the sun, which was extremely appealing to me because I use the sun for cyanotypes. I tried using it in the sun and it was just completely black. He told me, well, you expose it in the sun and then you develop in photographic chemicals. And I've looked around online for some advice on this because all of the tests I was running, even just barely showing it to the sun, like just for like a second, even in the shade, it was just way too much exposure. And I don't think that my enlarger bulb, I have to expose it for like a minute, and that's just longer than I want to be exposing it for.
Is that with your enlarger lens?
That's with the enlarger bulb, just like just like wide open,
with your lens fully open, with the
lens fully open. And I may have tried it dialing in some magenta, or I might have just had it completely white. But I think so. I think I need a brighter bulb than that for the Azo paper. But
interesting. Well, I mean, if people out there listening to the podcast, and if you're into the Facebook group, then share some stories about using Azo paper. There are several folks using what I know Graeme Young and even Graeme Jago, who's Amy is a UK podcast host on Sunny 16 with Rachel Brewster White. Both of those what we might call lumen prints, and Graeme Jago is using just some old paper that Rachel gave him, I think, and and just laying bits of foliage and leaves and things on and exposing it under the sun. I don't know how long he leaves it for, and I don't know what he's developing it in, but he's making some lovely prints, similar to those sort of cyanotype leaf prints.
Yes, I actually made a lumen just the other day. I've made them before. Yeah, you don't have to develop that. It just cooks.
Yeah.
Fun...
but it'll eventually just carry on. But you need to scan it quickly if you want to preserve it, presumably, do you?
You do. If you want to preserve it exactly as it looks, I always scan mine right away. You can fix them, which means that it'll be permanent, and then you could display it as is. But when you fix it, it changes the color. So, but that's a great way. It's a really fun way, I think, to use old photographic paper that you might not necessarily be able to print with.
Well, I've bought a load of old stuff recently with the intention of trying to make lith prints, which is another little passion of mine.
Oh.
And I'm not sure. At the moment, I'm using Foma paper to make my lith prints, but I bought some other stuff as well because it was cheap. And I thought, that's old and it's brand names that I remember. So maybe it'll still be okay. But if it's not, I'll try messing around in the sun with it.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes with old papers, you could still use it as long as it's not fogged. You just have to put bromide or something like that. Yeah.
Bromide. Yeah, that can help with fogging, can't it?
I haven't tried that.
Apparently. No, there's another one of those things like that I've read about, but I've never really used old paper. You see, I've always bought fresh, but now I do have a stack of older paper to play with because I thought, well, why not,
Right, absolutely. But yeah, so that's that's the contact printing. I don't know. I really am enjoying it. And with the 7x17 camera that I have.
So hang on a sec. So when you went from the Crown Graphic to your Kodak 33A, what changed in your approach to large format photography? Did you find you using it in different ways to the Crown Graphic, or did the 5.7 format affect your thinking in any way?
Well, I feel like I do use it in a different way to the Crown Graphic because of the lenses that I have for it.
Okay. Simon's just woken up now, so you.
We moved off from lumen prints now, have we?
Right. But the lenses that I have, so I have. When he gave me that camera, he gave me 4 lenses. 2 of them will only cover up to 4x5. The 2 that I have that cover 5x7, one of them, I can't remember exactly what it is. It might be like a 127 or something, but I honestly don't like it very much. It doesn't give me very good contrast. I need to keep giving it. I need to put some more time into it to figure out a way to get better contrast.
Is that
out
because
of it.
It's an older lens, or
it could be?
So would that be what would lead to that, Simon? Could it be uncoated, or could it just have some fungus in it?
Well, there could be quite a few reasons for it, and you've mentioned them there. But there is a case that some old lenses are better than others. It's as simple as that. So without knowing the lens, it's hard for me to really comment on that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the reason is, but. I don't want to waste too much film fooling with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the other lens that he gave me is a Protar lens, which I will admit I had not heard of before. Apparently, this is something kind of touching on legendary. What I like about it is I can go to f/64 with it, and that's that magical number from the past, isn't it? But it doesn't really have I don't know if I'm saying this right. It doesn't really have a shutter. I mean, there's no shutter speeds. You can adjust how wide it's open, but then you're the shutter speed with the lens cap.
So is it an old, sort of an old brass lens? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Simon, do you know?
You describe it. It sounds like it's a barrel lens.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Protar V5, I think.
And that I take it. Is it black?
No, it is brass in color, like that kind of color. It's really small too.
Okay. So I've seen the black ones, which are Carl Zeiss lenses, but I think they're the forerunner. I think they're the forerunner of the Tessar lenses. I think. I mean, it's certainly in the 1800s. I think with Protars. I'm not sure if they continued into the 20th century or not.
Who made Tessar lenses? That was a sort of design.
Yeah,
was Zeiss.
Yeah.
There's Tessars, and Tessars was Zeiss, and something else was someone else.
Well, I think the Protars. I think they were Zeiss as well.
Were they?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, although I think there was a lot of borrowed learning going on at that period anyway. But I'm pretty sure the Protar or I mean, I've seen one there, Protar Linz. I think it says, which is, I think Linz is going to be German for lens, I guess, but they also use objective as well, don't they? But the one that I saw was a convertible lens as well, so you can unscrew the back end of it. I think it's the back end you unscrew, and that actually changes the focal length of the lens.
Oh.
So I don't know if that would apply to yours. You might want to try that if it's set up to be able to use it. Just unscrew the rear part of the lens and see if you still get an image. So right. I've got a one that sounds quite similar to yours, and it's a 350 f. I don't know if it's f12 point something or something like that. But yeah, you unscrew the back of it, and it increases the focal length, and the rear element decreases the focal length when you put it back on again.
Oh, I will admit I don't know a great deal about it. I mean, even in terms of the focal length, it's one of those things that I should know, but I just don't off the top of my head. But it's a terrific lens in terms of, I don't know, I just think it makes really beautiful negatives, but obviously since it's a little bit, it feels a little bit like pinhole to me because I can't be that precise with it. It says, because I like to use it at f64. I think it only goes to f18 or something like that.
It's quite possible. I mean, it's certainly an old lens, but and if you're using that with really slow film, you don't need a shutter anyway. Yeah, because you're going to be in bulb mode, aren't you? So you're going to be. It
would be great, Amy, if you go onto the Kickstarter for Chromographica dry plate holders, which will be in, you can get a 5.7 one. Okay. Then you can have ISO 2. And you can that will be the perfect combination. That can then be your dry plate camera. You can put your photographer's hat over the lens and expose the image, and put your photographer's hat back over the lens, and you can process your dry plate in any film chemical. What are they? HC110, I think they recommend, but anyway, whatever. And you have lovely dry plate negatives made with your lovely old brass lens.
Perfect combo.
So go and check out the Kickstarter. It's still live at the moment, but when this podcast comes out, it probably won't be.
I think it carries on just a tad after the podcast finish. Yeah, I think it's September the 9th, and I think ours comes out on the 6th. I think, or something like that. Anyway.
So yeah, there's your perfect lens to use your ISO 2 glass plate negatives. Of course, you can use your that stack of Ilford multigrade pearl paper, which is a little bit faster than ISO 2, but still around
not
that.
Much.
Yeah, not much. And in your Texan Light, it might be 6 or something, But anyway.
I was just going to say the generally with those slow films though, the old photographs that you would see that were taken with very fast lenses. Because they were still relatively, there were still exposures over a second, even with a relatively fast lens. So,
but you could do landscapes, can't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And you get milky water and all of that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, or you can clamp your children's heads in a vice or something. Just stand still.
Yeah, try not to smile. They won't try at all. Right, I'm thinking we've been talking for quite a while, and we still. I think we should
7x17 camera. We've been
teasing that all the way through. Amy
you can't get this far. Not mention the 7x17 camera.
Let's do the 7x17.
Okay, well, that one he actually gave me in between the Crown Graphic and the.
So your dad gave you this one as well?
He did. I was like, okay, what's next? I have no idea. But honestly, it's not a very practical camera. And the lens that I have 2 lenses for it now. The other one that I got, I actually haven't even used yet. But the one that he gave me with the camera, I have not really laid eyes on it in quite some time, but it's definitely a very old lens. He made water stops for me, and it's one of those that you have to use the little, the bulb that you squeeze.
So the lens, you instead of changing an aperture, you actually slide in Waterhouse stops, they're called, aren't they? That's it. So different size holes you would slide in on a brush on a metal shim, or they just slide in and out. So that's how you're changing your aperture.
He made them out of. I think he sacrificed some old faulty film holders. So he made it out of the plastic dark slide thing for the film holder. But so it's really super fun to use in that sense. It definitely takes a few minutes to set the camera up, just between getting it out of the trunk that it lives in and successfully maneuvering it onto the tripod. Because, heaven help me if I break that piece of ground glass. And then, you have to put the little tube for the bulb onto it and everything. And I usually give it quite a few tests before I actually make a picture. But you can get 7x17 film. Ilford does their ultra large format run, I think like once a year or something.
Okay.
But it's about $10 a sheet. So I prefer to use paper negatives. And my dad gave me, along with that, he gave me a huge roll of single weight fiber paper. So what I do, and this is the reason why I didn't manage to get any of those holders loaded, I have to cut it down so that it'll go into the holder. It's something else loading a film holder that's that big. And even pulling the dark slide out, you feel like you're pulling it out for 5 minutes when you're making an explosive. It's this huge thing, and then trying to get it back in there. And the holders are very old. They're wooden. I suspect that this camera will be a little piece of my hometown history as well. It probably belonged to one of the old photographers there. So I've used it at home a couple of times because I really, it deserves to be used more, but I feel like it's much more of a landscape type camera.
Or very tall trees like sequoias.
I'd say that's the thing. I don't think I can't do portrait. It's only landscape.
Yeah,
I wouldn't dare to try to tilt the thing. And the back does not, the back doesn't rotate. On my other view camera, the 33A, the back rotates, which is nice. Yeah. But so that big barrel lens that I got with it is pretty telephoto. Because when I took it out in Austin to this big graffiti wall, I thought, well, this will be interesting, and it'll be perfect because you've got this crazy landscape negative. But then I realized that I probably would have had to have been standing across the street from the wall in order to get all of it onto one photograph. So I kind of did it in sections instead. And after that, I ended up buying a wider angle lens for it. But like I say, I haven't taken it out. And it's been in the back of my mind. I have this guilt that I still haven't used it because I've had it for years. But it's just quite the effort to take that camera out. But the paper negatives, I had to give them a good bit of exposure, since I think I was rating it at 6. And I made some contact prints from it. You get your paper negative, and ideally you should wash it thoroughly and let it dry first. But I think I was impatient, so I just slapped it on the paper wet and made a contact print. And it's amazing to me
you get good contact then.
Yeah, right. It's amazing to me that it works. It really kind of blows my mind that like the sensitivity of the paper, that you can shine the enlarger light through another piece of paper and make an image.
Yeah, it's lots of fun in the darkroom with paper negatives.
Absolutely. But yeah, that is something that I'm like, okay, I'm going to make it happen. As soon as it cools off a little bit, I'm going to take it out and
What I'd love you to do, if you can, is to, when you join the Large Format Photography podcast group, Facebook group, which you will do now, of course, is to just take some pictures of these wonderful things we've been talking about all afternoon, and share pictures of the equipment, but also any pictures that you've made with them, good or bad, but it would be just lovely. And any questions you have over, say, actually, I've been wondering about that lens you were talking about on the 5.7, for instance. Some folks might know more about it, and if Simon sees it, he might be able to chirp in. But it would be really lovely to see these things that you've been talking about, these old wooden cameras and things that your dad gave you, shared into the group. Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, well, I think it's time finally to do the last 2 emails that we've got from one person. So do you want to take that away, Andrew?
Yeah, sure. So Ian Fleming, friend of the show, friend of many shows.
Certainly
Ian Fleming, and all-round lovely person, sent 2 emails. Make sure I get them. I'm not sure if I'm getting these in the right order or not. The first one's easy to deal with because it's not really a question, but I'll read it anyway. Let's just get it up. Ian, Simon, Andrew. Sounds like something from the Bible, doesn't it? Oh, that's Simon Peter. Really enjoyed this episode. So he's referring to the last podcast when we had the Chroma Graphica, Steve Lloyd and Jason Lane on, talking about their Kickstarter, which we've been mentioned a few times this week. Really enjoyed this episode. I'd back it anyway. Well, we know, Ian, we know you, like me, you back all sorts of things. Just not the right horses sometimes. That's why you're not a millionaire. As I'm really keen to try dry plate. Keep up the good work. Well, I'm really keen as well, Ian. And so is Amy now, because she's got a lovely 5x7 camera and she can go onto the Kickstarter and back a 5x7 dry plate holder and then go and buy some dry plates. So thank you very much, Ian. Always lovely to hear from you. And the second one is Simon Andrew. I've recently been given this lovely camera, 3.25 by 4.25. Well, that's what there was a number of those sizes, Simon, wasn't there? There was sort of what could often be just called 3x4, but there weren't just 3.25 by 4.25. I think there were some other slight variations on it as well.
Yeah, I mean that's the same size as my baby speed.
Yeah. And then it says big issues with the 124-118 film availability. So I'm not sure, Ian, what you're talking about. I don't know what 124 film and 118 film availability is. What's that, Simon? Do you know?
Not specifically, but Ian does like his odd film sizes. I think it's a case of if they don't make it, then that makes Ian interested in it.
Right. But so does this camera take roll film then, or I thought it was a sheet film camera?
Well, he's not actually said what his camera is.
No, you're confusing. You need to give us more information, Ian. Anyway, so he says he's got spools.
So it's at the top. It's in the title. It's a Kodak No. 3 folding brownie.
So it's not a. So it is a roll film camera. There we go. Apologies. Just read your emails properly, and then I'd see Kodak No. 3 folding brownie. That must be the camera that he's been given. There we go. And so it takes 124 and 118 film. Well, I know there was a whole host of odd film sizes, wasn't there, years and years ago, and they've faded from memory. And I know that Ian is very keen to resurrect any kind of film. He sees it as a personal challenge to making I think he's even put sprocket holes in some weird
126, I think.
Is that what it was? 126. Yeah.
Wow.
He was telling me when I met him, he's got a machine to do that. He's a very interesting chap. If you ever get the chance to meet Ian face to face and get him to talk all his interesting backstory. Anyway, so he's got big issue with this film. He's got spools and backing paper. Okay, good. Might consider cutting down some 10x8 to get maybe 3 frames to shoot. Okay, but I'm amazed it has front rise and fall and a lovely lens and shutter. Sounds like a good enough reason to try and make it work in. Is there enough interest in these lovely 100-year-old cameras? I don't know. Maybe. And are they considered large format? I'd probably say no, but I don't really care that much. If you want to call it large format, generally if it's roll film, that doesn't fall into the large format category. Even if the film area is bigger than a little Diddy sheet film camera.
Yeah. Well, back in our first episode, I sort of tried to make 3¼ by 4¼ eligible for large format, seeing I had one.
Yeah, and it's sheet film, isn't it?
I was shot down in flames from many angles. So
ignore them. What do they know? All those naysayers. If you want to call it large format and it's a sheet film, then but generally 4:5 is what people define, don't they? And if it's a roll film, I think Ian. Probably not, mate. Sorry, but it sounds lovely.
It does. Share
some pictures in the large form. We'll let you share some pictures in the large format.
He's not on Facebook, unfortunately.
Oh, he's not, is he? No.
It's on Instagram.
That's not very helpful. He's on Instagram. Okay. Well, you can follow Ian Fleming on Instagram, but just make sure you get the right one, not the dead author.
Actually, I'll just see if I can. Here we go. If you want to follow him on Instagram, it is iFleming, and that's with 1 M. So iFleming, and you can see what he's been up to.
I found him.
And I think we might have found the camera as well, actually.
Yeah, see the camera there.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Oh, that's lovely.
What a lovely camera.
That's gorgeous.
I'll put it details in the show notes to Ian, and his Instagram feed. So, yeah.
Okay. Well,
there we go.
That's it for the emails. And I just want to mention a post that went into our Facebook group from Ali. I don't know if it's Horick or Horick. And it's to keep an eye open for a stolen KB Canon Woodfield 8x10 camera and associated kit. This camera was stolen as Ali was on her way to the University of Montana, I think it is, and it was actually stolen, I think, out of a U-Haul truck at Billings in Montana. So this is some beautiful equipment that's been stolen from Ali, and it's quite rare stuff. There's information on the podcast Facebook group, so you can see the details of everything that's gone there. So there's 8x10 Woodfield camera, 8x10 projector, 300mm Nikon, all the serial numbers are there, Sinar boards, and so on and so on, even tripods and digital spot meters and so on. So it's the whole kit's gone, this is pretty tragic. So hopefully, the word gets out there, and this stuff can get back to Ali.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It is. It's not something you hear. Well, I suppose, it's a fairly niche pastime, I suppose, large format photography. But somebody obviously saw it and thought that looks shiny and lovely and probably worth something. But there's only where are you going to sell it? You're going to sell it into areas where other large format photographers would look. So folks, just keep an eye out if it's. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Well, it was the U-Haul trailer that was broken into, so there's a reasonable chance that people would have just grabbed whatever was there, and they might not have actually known what was actually there, possibly.
No.
Which is probably the case.
Wow. Yeah. Goodness me.
So Ali, I don't know if you listened to the show or not, but fingers crossed for you there. I really hope you get your gear back.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, one last thing to move on to, and that's to say thank you to those people that have contributed to the show, and our most regular contributors have contributed again. So thank you, James Thorpe, and thank you, Christopher J. May. And Christopher J. May also said this is after the episode with Jason Lane and Steve Lloyd, another enjoyable episode. Thank you as always, gents, and thank you, Christopher, and thank you, James.
Yeah, thanks for your ongoing support. It's great.
Yeah, and I think that's just about it. So, Amy, it's been great to have you on the show. There's just so much. There's so much actually that we didn't really get a chance to touch upon. As usual, that seems to be the way, doesn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, I was chatting to some people over the weekend when I was away, and we were talking about length of podcasts, and you know, a lot of somebody said, "Well, can you not talk less?" I said, "Yeah, probably." But you know, I think Amy's done a lot of the talking, and we didn't get on to a lot of areas. You know, Amy has a wonderful blog. We'll give a shout out in a minute too, I'm sure, and. You know, she travels a lot. She's very much into photographing her family. And I think her love of family and certainly the legacy that a wonderful father has left her. Well, he's still with us, but, you know, he's the legacy that he has brought into Amy's life has just shone through in everything she's had to say today. And that's wonderful. But I would have liked to have had a little more time to talk about motivations and ideas and thought processes. But maybe next time, Amy.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me on. This has really been lots of fun.
It has, and just to those people on Instagram who want to follow Amy, it's Amy Jasek as one word, and that's. And we'll do the spelling in a second. But if you scroll down a little bit, you will see a picture of Amy's father.
Is that the large format portrait you took with your Graflex? In a chair.
Be.
It's for Happy Father's Day.
Let's see.
10 weeks ago. So.
That was in June. I'm like, what did I make that with?
Happy Father's Day.
Okay, that was with
Graflex.
That was with a Graflex XL. Another thing that he gave me, which honestly, like you talk about how some of the medium format cameras are pretty big and you may as well be using large format. I kind of feel that way about that camera.
Is that what it is? Is that a medium format camera then?
It is. It has a variety of different sized backs, 6x7, 6x9.
Wow.
But yeah, I think it needs to be cleaned. It's really difficult to focus.
I've never heard of that camera before. I've just found some pictures of it. It's a bit like the Mamiya press camera.
Yeah, it's a whopper.
Oh, that big square thing, the fugly thing.
But it looks better, actually, I've got to say. Well, there we go.
That takes lots of different backs, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Reflex.
Yeah.
I mustn't go and look at pictures of cameras.
Well, close that down. But Amy, it's just been absolutely great having you. Could you guide our listeners as to where they can find more of your work?
Well, you can see it on Instagram. I really enjoy Instagram in general. I also have a website, which is Texas Girl Photography, all one word, .com. And I share work on there, although I'm pretty guilty about only updating the blog and not really updating anything else. Although it's been my mission this year to blog once a week, and I've actually achieved it so far. I'm patting myself on the back for getting this far.
Well, you've got around about 10 days before this podcast goes out, so you can fill it with lots of large format stuff now.
Yeah, we were struggling to find too many pictures of, so much so that Simon was wondering if you did actually use large format cameras, Amy.
You're right. I don't think I have a lot of large format work on there. Yeah, I'm bad. Like I say, I'm bad about not necessarily scanning all of it. And
it would be lovely to see a few examples with the cameras into the Facebook group at least. So
yes, you bet.
There's your task.
You bet.
Or else we won't put your podcast.
There's your homework. You've got 10 days.
I interrupted you there. So you got texasgirlphotography.com. You got Amy Jasek on Instagram. Is there anywhere else you're out there?
Flickr?
Not really. I don't use my photography Facebook page that much. That's Texas Girl Photography as well on Facebook. So that's about it.
No, on Flickr. On Flickr, you have some? I don't know if you updated it much, but...
no, not in many
But there are
years.
some on there.
Yeah, I mean, I've briefly sort of delved into just about everything that's out there, including DeviantArt, but I have I can't. It's a website.
Did we not get to talk about that?
I actually met some lovely people on the DeviantArt website. One of whom I
put it in the
met
show
in
notes.
person. DeviantArt.
Art.
I'm not sure how much of a thing it is anymore. I think it used to be quite big, but
Simon's gone awfully quiet. He's on there now. I could hear the keys clicking.
I have heard of this, and I don't think it's what you think it is.
Oh, okay.
yeah, probably not. But don't be deceived by the name. But yeah, there's so many different places out there, and there's just only so much time. So yeah, I kind of just focus on Instagram these days because it's quick and easy, and I don't know, the community there seems really great in terms of film photography. So that's the main place for now.
Well, add the large format photography podcast Facebook group to your list, Amy, because there's some lovely people there as well, and they would love to see your cameras and some pickies.
I will. I absolutely will.
Very much.
That's it. And do you have any shout outs you might want to give out?
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to give a shout out to the Film Shooters Collective,
which we didn't talk about.
But I actually I run the Instagram account for that, and we have takeovers every weekend. Members of the collective take over and share their work, and I'm doing. I don't do quite as much of it as I used to, but I'm still a content manager for the website. So if anybody listening to this is a film photographer and would like to write something for our website, get in touch with me. Always looking for people to write for us.
So you mentioned separately, I think, on another email about my nothing to do with large format, my hotel ghost project.
Yes.
That'll be finished in December, and I was going to put some words with it because I see it complete as a series, a body of work with some words detailing thoughts. Trying to put some thoughts with the images.
Yes.
So I'll share that with you in due course.
Excellent. I'd also like to give a shout out if anybody listening is into making cyanotypes. World Cyanotype Day is coming up the last Saturday in September, and I would love for you to go check out worldcyanotypeday.com. That has all the information about it. I mean, this is a whole...
Last Saturday in September, did you say?
Yeah. I mean, this is a whole other topic, obviously. But
it is one we could have talked about next year.
And if people go to the website, hopefully that will... I'm pretty sure on the website there's information about the Facebook group, which is very active. Same name. And there's an official page and the Instagram as well. The World Cyanotype Day is the sort of brainchild and passion project of a woman from Shootapalooza. So that's a group of mostly female photographic artists that I'm a member of. And again, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, those are probably my shout outs, other than my dad, which unfortunately you can't check out on social media or anything.
We'd love to have him on the show. Do you think he'd come and talk to us?
I don't know. I can ask him.
Well, that would be with you, as in like the two of you together.
That would be great. That would get you back and to cover some of these other areas, and then then maybe your dad would feel more comfortable if you were doing it. Maybe after he listens to this, it'll either put him off or encourage him.
Perhaps, yeah. No pressure, Dad.
Right, well, again, thank you very, very much for being with us. Andrew, have you got any shout outs this week?
I do actually have a shout out, yeah, and it's a friend who shoots mainly pinhole work, but she does large format pinhole work, and she's very active in the pinhole world. Her name is Diane Peterson, Peterson.
I know her.
Yeah, and if you go to DianePeterson.com, that's her main website. In fact, it might not be up to date now. Maybe that's not her place. She also goes under the name of Pinhole Queen, I think, in places. But you'll find her all over Facebook and Twitter, Diane Peterson. And you'll see she has these flat friends, she calls them. They're like cardboard cutouts, wooden cutouts of people that she decorates and put animal heads on and makes families of them and puts them in different scenarios. Yeah, I think the website I just quoted is an old one, out of date. But if you look up Diane Peterson pretty much on any platform and look at her wonderful pinhole work, particularly the stuff she's doing with large format.
She's on Instagram as well.
She is, yeah. I picked up an old website here, so ignore that. I think that's the one been superseded. But you'll see she's posting regularly into various Facebook groups and does some great work. And she's lovely as well. We met her when she came over for World Pinhole Day meetup 2 years ago.
Excellent. Well, I don't have any shout-outs this week, although for some reason now I feel like we've already mentioned Graeme Jago of the Sun 16 podcast.
We have.
And in a private chat, he was deriding our theme music again.
Did he call it clown music or something?
He calls it clown music, yeah. And,
that makes us even more determined to keep it.
Yeah, exactly. The more you can play Graeme, the more we're going to play. In fact, we might do extra long intros just for Graeme. So yeah, that's it. Andrew, how can people follow you when you're not doing this podcast?
They can follow me on the other podcast, which Amy may well come on to at some point, which is the Lensless podcast, which is all about pinhole photography. And you can find me there. You can find me hanging out in the large format photography Facebook group and online on Twitter and Instagram as Warboys Snapper. And my pinhole stuff is warboysnapper_pinholes. Okay, and
I'm on Twitter as Simon4. That's SIMON. I can't spell my own name anymore. Well, there's 4 at the end of Simon, and the 4 is spelled FOR. On Twitter, I'm on where is it? Instagram as Simon Forster Photographic, and I've actually just followed the Film Shooters Collective now, so I urge you guys to do that too.
Excellent.
And I'm not trying to. Not bribe, but coerce Amy into putting one of my shots up there. But I'm going to put the tag on there, which is hey, do it. FSC is a hashtag, and you have a chance of getting your film shots featured on the Film Shooters Collective by Amy. So that's a good thing to do.
I didn't know that.
That is me that does the choosing.
Exactly. Well, I'm gonna. I've already I put it out yesterday, but I'm going to put that tag onto one of those panorama shots I did with the. I've got
the bird,
the gull in flight with the panorama camera.
Yeah, you've never seen such a great picture. Well, you have, I'm sure, but this is not shot with a horizon camera capturing a seagull complete with distorted wings in the middle of the frame.
I see it. That's terrific.
Yeah,
right.
That's terrific.
Well, I'll stick the hashtag on there.
Excellent.
Thank you. And what else? I've got an eBay store, and the best way to find that is if you just go into the show notes, which are found in our Facebook group, the Large Format Photography Facebook group, and also on Podbean, which is where our podcast is hosted. So if you go onto Podbean and just type in Large Format Photography Podcast, you'll find us, and you'll see all our show notes there and all the links that we put in, or should I say Andrew puts in. He does a great job on the show notes there. So that's it. I've mentioned the music already. I'm going to mention it again. Our great music, which is called Two Fingered Johnny by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. And that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's show and this fortnight show, as perhaps is a better way of putting it. And it'll be great if you can join us again next time. So goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.